he ordered tampons in boys' bathrooms, okay? He signed a law letting the state kidnap children to change their gender so that they go home. But I'm not talking about him, I'm talking about her. This is her ideology. That's why she picked him. And he signed a bill allowing pedophiles to claim human rights protections under the state law.
This all started with a bill authored by Representative Leigh Finke that crossed out language in existing statute. And the effect of that language was to exclude a physical or sexual attachment to a child by an adult. Another word for that would be pedophilia. To exclude that from consideration as a sexual orientation under the chapter of law dealing with human rights and protected classes. Okay. So the effect of the bill would be to take existing language that says, hey, by the way, a physical and sexual attraction to a child by an adult doesn't qualify as a sexual orientation, and just draw a line through that language and say that we're just getting rid of that. We're repealing that. That's what the effect of the bill was. In response to that, and by the way, that bill got wrapped into this judiciary and public safety omnibus that we've been debating and that was passed off the House floor last night. In response to that, Representative Harry Niska, Republican, offered an amendment when we debated this bill. And the effect of that amendment was to move that language to a different section of the chapter and just to specify, to take out the reference to sexual orientation, because the offered rationale by the author, Finke, as to why we needed to draw a line through this language, excluding pedophilia from consideration as a sexual orientation, is that it was offensive to the LGBT community. Others have said that this presents a harmful trope of LGBT people having some sort of predilection towards predatory behavior when it comes to children. And so in order to combat that trope, in order to I don't even fully understand the argument. Basically, in order to spare people's feelings, we need to cross out this language. And in doing so, remove a firewall in our law, which says, hey, you're never going to be able to claim your attraction to children as some sort of special protected status that entitles you to benefit from anti-discrimination law, right? Like, seems like kind of not a fair deal, right? Like if your objective is to combat a trope, which is, in other words, an idea in the culture, changing the law in a substantial way to remove a protection for kids seems like a bit of a high price to pay, in my opinion. And apparently everybody in the House of Representatives agreed, because we had a 126-0 vote in favor of the Niska amendment to shift this language over so that it was no longer attached to the concept of sexual orientation, but that it still was in the law, providing that firewall, that bulwark against any future bizarre interpretation of law. Well, apparently that wasn't satisfactory to the queer caucus. And I can say that definitively now because they've stood up on the House floor since and made the case against having any language in law to preclude pedophilia from consideration as a protected class. And indeed, we're going to look at one of those examples right now. And indeed, it is the author, Representative Leigh Finke, on the House floor last night. So I'm going to bring this up and we are going to react to it in real time.
See Representative Finke.
Members, I rise in support of the bill today. I've risen numerous times on the floor since arriving here, but I haven't risen to speak since the last time that this bill was in this chamber. The last time this bill was in this chamber, my life turned upside down. And I haven't wanted to speak again because now I know what happens when I speak. What happens when I speak is different than it was before that day. And I'm nervous, and I just want to acknowledge that because this bill has completely upended my life.
All right. So you'll notice right from the outset that the focus here is entirely on the representative's personal feelings and personal experience. And this really does set the stage for what follows, because the entire argument here is that because of how the law makes certain people feel, we ought to change it, regardless of the substance of that law, regardless of the effect of that law on innocent life. We need to change the law because of how certain people feel about it being worded in the way that it is.
Excuse me. My other bill that we have in this project is the Take Pride Act. And, a lot of things have...
Let's just pause right there. So the title of the bill that removes language from the Human Rights Act, excluding pedophilia from consideration as a sexual orientation, is called the Take Pride Act. So by implication, the LGBT community is taking pride in removing a civil protection against pedophilia from state law. That's what they're saying. It's not what I'm saying. That's not my presentation of their action. That's their presentation of their action. The Take Pride Act, which scratches out language from the Human Rights Act, which says we're not going to consider the physical or sexual attachment to a child by an adult to be a sexual orientation. Telling. Let's go forward.
Have been said about that piece of legislation. A lot of things have been said for the last few weeks, a lot of things in the Senate, a lot of things here tonight about this agency bill that I happened to pick up in my first session.
Okay, so that's worth pausing to note as well. And I didn't know this, that apparently this was an agency bill. And so, in other words, a state agency crafted this bill and handed it to the representative to introduce and to advance through the legislature. That's very alarming. So it's not just your elected officials who pushed for this. It's the people whose salaries are paid for with your tax dollars in positions of leadership within state agencies who are pushing this idea that we should remove an existing exemption of pedophilia from consideration as a sexual orientation or protected class. Alarming, don't you think? All right, let's go back.
And, a lot of people tonight, specifically have said they just can't understand it. You just can't understand why. Why would we do this? And I just want to say that, I think we've done a pretty good job of laying that case out. I made the case in committee along with the commissioner, Rebecca Lucero. I know Breon Curran has been fighting the good fight, making the case. Representative Becker-Finn has made the case. The why. Why does it matter to us? Why does it matter so much to us? You just can't understand it.
All right, so there's the naming of names. Human Rights Commissioner Rebecca Lucero, Representative Jamie Becker-Finn, Representative Byron Curran, and of course, Representative Leigh Finke. The naming of names of people who have been making the case why we need to scratch out language from the Human Rights Act, excluding the physical or sexual attachment to a child by an adult as consideration as a sexual orientation and protected class. Those are the folks pushing this. And again, one of them is a commissioner of the Department of Human Rights whose salary is paid by you in order to protect your rights ostensibly. And in the course of doing that is pushing to actually remove a protection for the rights of our children. It just, the deeper you dig into this thing, the worse it gets.
And if you've heard our reasons and you don't agree with them, that's fine. I would just like to say, it's okay that you don't understand it. Maybe you don't need to understand some things. I'm a trans person. People tell me all the time, they just don't understand the gender thing. I just don't get it. They think it's a delusion. They think it's unreal, right? We heard tonight, somebody kept saying LGB community, and we hear that. We hear that you're dropping the T, right? Because there aren't trans people. It's like, we live here. We just have this space where people they either don't understand or they don't want to. And you don't need to understand it. You could listen. You could listen to what we're saying here.
Okay, so this is let's unpack this a little bit, because it's a bizarre pivot to go from acknowledging that we don't understand why you would want to do this to then saying you don't need to understand why we want to do this, and then connect a third dot, which is you don't understand who or what we even are. There's a connection there. Clearly, in the mind of Representative Leigh Finke, there's a connection between those three things. And I don't think this should be glossed over. I think this needs to be pointed out and dwelled on. The idea that at root, what is being claimed here is that identity is at stake. We need to remove from law an exemption of a physical attraction to children by an adult as consideration as a sexual orientation in order to affirm the identity of trans people. That seems to be what is being said here. Now, that doesn't make any sense to me either. Like, none of this makes any sense. But the more we listen to the representative talk here, the more bizarre and unusual and inexplicable this becomes. And ultimately, the argument seems to be building up to your consent and understanding is not required in a democratic republic, in a constitutional republic. In your representative government, your understanding and consent is not required. That's basically what we're building to here.
The original authors of this bill, Representatives Alan Spear and Karen Clark, the first two queer people who served in this building, they worked for a decade to pass this legislation, and they had this one sentence. And that one sentence, they did not want it. It has no legislative intent. Any one of you could have found that out by asking research. Anybody could have recognized reality and stopped lying, but you didn't.
All right. I'm not going to have Representative Leigh Finke lecture me on the recognition of reality. Okay. That's number one. Number two, the intent. So there's been people who've wanted to get rid of this language for 10 years. How is that an argument for it? The legislative intent of those people was to get rid of it. How is that an argument for it? I have eyes, I can read, I have a brain, I can think, I understand the meaning of words, I can read bills, I can read statute, I can read law. When you cross out words which say the physical or sexual attachment to children by an adult shall not be considered a sexual orientation under this chapter, when you strike those, when you put a line through those words, the effect of that action, that legislative action, is to remove a firewall in the law which prevents that from happening at some point in the future. You are enabling potentially that to happen at some point in the future. That's what that legislative action does. I don't care about the intent. That's what the legislative action does. And the fact that people have been trying to do it for 10 years is not an argument to do it. This is just, oh my Lord. It's so infuriating.
It's a sentence with no legislative intent that the original queer members of this body did not want. And it's not a surprise to me. It's a shock, but it's not a surprise that the first trans person and the first non-binary person get into this body, and we have to spend a month fighting over one sentence with no legislative intent.
All right. So once again, just as it was at the beginning of this whole thing, it's all about Representative Leigh Finke, and it's all about Finke's identity, and it's all about me, look at how I feel. That's what this is all about, is the historic moment of Representative Leigh Finke being oppressed because somebody pauses to question why you would take language out of law that puts up a firewall against pedophilia. The fact that we didn't just all accept that and go, oh yeah, of course, that's totally normal. You no legislative intent, you say? All right, then get rid of it. Like, this argument is so bizarre on its face. And again, the fact that it keeps being wrapped up in identity, which really makes no logical, rational sense. Like, what does that language have to do with your identity? Okay, this is the bizarre paradox that seems to be on offer. Is, on the one hand, they argue that we need to get rid of this language because it puts forward this harmful trope that there's some connection between the LGBT community and predatory behavior against children. And we go, okay, we agree that that is a harmful trope and that connection should not be made. And then right after that, every chance they get, they keep reattaching that connection by making it about their identity. Like, which is it? Pick a lane.
Nothing. It's just poison. It's a poison pill. And somebody here said, nobody thinks LGBT people have anything to do with pedophilia. And I'm going to just say, if you think that's what happens in this country, you don't know queer people. You don't know what our lives are like. You don't know what it means to be associated with the most vile, cruel lies possible. I know what that's like now, because that lie spread through this building, and it has turned my life upside down. Okay,
so that is 100% your fault. You cannot expect to introduce a bill that has the effect of removing a legal firewall, protecting kids from pedophilia. You cannot expect to introduce that legislation and not have people question your motives. That is an unreasonable expectation. If you wanted this to go differently, then you should have proactively gotten out there in front of it and made the case. This is why this needs to happen. And not just any case, certainly whatever case you needed to make in order to make this work. I can't imagine what it would have been, but it certainly isn't the case you're making. Okay. Going in front of Minnesota, going in front of Minnesotans and saying, because of how I feel and because of how previous queer people have felt, and because this is something that I'm just declaring has no legislative intent, we need to strike this language that, when you just look at it objectively, you can see provides a legal firewall against pedophilia protecting children. That's not a very good case. So you would have had to actually come up with the case first, which you have not to date, and then present it. And the idea that nobody was going to notice and that nobody was going to have a problem with it and that nobody was going to question your motives when you're doing something that on its face is extremely eyebrow raising, to say the least. To the extent you've gotten blowback for that, it is 100% your fault. You cannot expect the rest of us to just not question that. Are you kidding me? Apparently not.
So please stop acting like this one sentence is everything. What matters is these gun laws that we are going to make here that are going to help people survive this world.
Now you'll notice the representative keeps referring to this one sentence. But what the representative never does is tell you what that sentence is, right? And again, the sentence is very close to, I don't have it in front of me, but very close to this: a physical or sexual attachment to children by an adult shall not be considered a sexual orientation under this chapter. That's basic. That is, if not verbatim, very close to what the sentence, the just one sentence is. That's a pretty meaningful, impactful, substantive sentence that means something and does something. And you know how I know it does something? Because if it didn't do anything, if it was just this inert language in the bill, you wouldn't be looking to get rid of it. Right? If that one sentence doesn't do anything, then there would be no point in removing it. So please, don't insult our intelligence, right? We're not stupid. When the point of introducing a bill, the point of striking existing language in statute is to accomplish something. And it is rational for people to ask, what you doing here? Especially when objectively the effect of what you're doing is removing a protection for children against pedophilia.
We're going to get people back into a place in their lives where they can do good. Do good. Help people. Who are you helping? Who are you helping by continuing to attack one sentence that every person here who is a member of this community has told you is harmful?
Well, allow me to answer that question. What I'm doing is protecting kids. What I'm doing is fighting for language that provides a firewall in the law to ensure that a physical or sexual attachment to children by an adult is never regarded as a sexual orientation or a protected class in the state of Minnesota. That is what I'm doing. I mean, what are you doing? Right? Like, and again, that's like, why would you want to take that language out? And the answer keeps going back to it's harmful. It's harmful. How is it harmful? How is the presence of that language in statute hurting you or anyone else? This has not been articulated. All we're told is they just keep doubling down on this is how we feel. It's harmful. There's no legislative intent. All of these like nebulous nonsense terms that don't actually communicate anything. How is it harmful? It perpetrates a trope. Okay. And so, like, why is that a problem? That this is the solution to, and how is this the solution to whatever that problem is? You actually have to explain these things. And I think what we see happening here is this is one of the central tenets and aspects of critical theory. It's this idea of a kind of viewpoint Gnosticism that, and you heard it articulated by the representative here, where we're told that you don't know what it's like. You don't know what it's like to be us. You don't know what it's like to be queer. You don't know what it's like to be trans. And therefore, the implication is we have no obligation to explain it to you. You have to just accept our truth because it's our truth. You're incapable of understanding our truth, but just trust us. This is the right thing to do. And we don't owe you an explanation. That's what the implication is. And I'm sorry, that doesn't fly. Okay. There is nothing. We all have different viewpoints. We all have different life experiences. We all have different lived experiences, however you want to call it. And certainly there are certain experiences that are difficult to transmit through communication. But truth, overriding truth, the physical reality in which we live and moral truths do not fit into that category. You should be able to explain in clear moral terms how you are being harmed by this language and why the compelling state interest of protecting kids from pedophiles is a lesser concern than protecting you from this undefined nebulous harm. And if you can't do that, then all of the worst assumptions about your motives, whether they're true or not, are fair game, because the obligation is on you to defend your actions and what you're prescribing. It's not on us to grant you the highest possibility, the highest benefit of doubt.
We are saying it's harmful. If you don't understand, I'm sorry. Maybe listen to the queer people in the world who are telling you and move forward with your lives, recognizing the truth, which is that this sentence has no legislative intent and it should be removed.
Okay, so you see what I'm saying? It's the representative is literally telling you what I just said, that you need to listen to them, accept what they're saying on faith, give them the benefit of the doubt, and just move on with your life. Don't care. Why do you care? That's basically what's being said here. And that is not an acceptable defense of this policy. It's just astounding to me that this is the posture. This is the best argument from the author of the bill. The best argument for doing this is that you just need to trust the fact that there's a reason. We can't tell you what it is, but there's a reason. I'm speechless. I'm speechless. I just don't know. The fact that utter and complete nonsense is empowered. That would be completely nebulous. That was like Billy Madison style. We're all stupider for having heard that style of argument. And that has power in the state of Minnesota. That is empowered. The governing trifecta passed that, and Governor Walz will sign it into law on that basis. The basis of trans people have been trying for 10 years to do this. They feel bad about it. It's harmful in ways that we can't describe. And you should just move on with your life and not ask questions. That is a prevailing argument in Minnesotan jurisprudence when it comes to protecting kids from pedophiles.
We will not be silenced. Our community can never be silenced. We are here, forever queer, and we are not going to stop.